County Limerick. My parents were farmers. I had quite a happy childhood down there, although when I got into the teenage years, I found it a little isolating. So I worked very hard in school. I knew I wanted to go to college. I wanted to go to Dublin, and I went to Dublin to study radiography. And when I graduated, it was one of the few professions at the time that there was a choice of jobs. So I hopped on a train down to Cork, did an interview, got the job, and off I went. And I worked in Cork University Hospital for the bulk of 20 years. I loved it. I loved the adrenaline rush, the excitement, being part of teams, working with people. And I undertook a wide variety of roles, from kind of the cut and thrust of the front line to equipment procurement, acquisition projects, advancements in technology, that type of thing. And plus, I did a lot of traveling. I took time off at various times. And as a child, I always sort of thought the world is so big. And we had a globe at home. It was a blow-up ball globe. And I do remember twirling it a lot, particularly in my early teenage years, thinking, ooh, the world is so big. You know, I want to go here, 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 and here. And I guess radiography allowed me to do that. And I worked in Australia for a while, did a lot of traveling around
Very good.
Asia, Australia, did a lot of traveling in the States. And then I settled down. I had 4 kids, and my husband at the time got a promotion, moved to Dublin, and I was in Cork. At that point, I had set up and I was managing the symptomatic breast imaging unit in Cork University Hospital, which was a busy station. I had 4 kids, one of whom has an intellectual disability. And I just woke up one day, 2 years into my husband commuting from Dublin to Cork, Monday to Friday. And I thought, Dublin can't be that difficult. And I think that was around Christmas time, and we moved in February. So that was a big move. I reluctantly gave in my notice and moved to Dublin. So initially, the overwhelm, the traffic, trying to get kids settled into school, accessing disability services, all of that took its toll. It took a lot of management. So I didn't work outside the home initially. We moved house a couple of times. Eventually we bought a house, which was a project. It was a doer-upper, as they call them. And I took that on as well. But as soon as we moved into the house, I knew, right, now I need to move on to the next chapter. And that was when I discovered coaching. I sort of, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I went to a career coach, but I only went for 2 sessions. And I thought, actually, I'd love to know more about coaching. And at that time, I think all the stress in the move and the few years that had gone before had taken its toll. And I had become more interested in sort of how the mind works, in that brain-body connection, because I had a lot of challenges health-wise, as in I had a lot of aches and pains, a lot of muscle tension, and I was picking up, my immunity was low. I was picking up all sorts of coughs, colds, viruses, that sort of thing.
Yes.
And I think it was through coaching that I discovered how brain and body is connected, and moved on to the next module, the next type of coaching. I did life and executive first, then I went into career coaching. I studied neuro wellness coaching, and then I did an advanced diploma in coaching with neuroscience, which was for me the icing on the cake, because finally I got it. I understood how the human brain works, and that has been a life changer for me, really, John. And that's where I'm at now.
Very good. Just going back to your childhood there, you mentioned about growing up in a farm in County Limerick. Were your parents dairy or beef farmers? Were they mixed farmers? And were you from the west part of Limerick or the east part of the county?
We were southeast, Bruff. We lived a few miles outside Bruff, which is the heart of the Golden Vale. So, yeah, we were dairy farmers. And I think my parents raised us with a very strong work ethic. So there were 5 of us, and we all knew our jobs. My sister always chose to work inside the house, whereas I always chose to work outside. I loved cows, calves, we had sheep, we had pigs, all at various stages. We had greyhounds, sheepdogs, hens, chickens, turkeys, so there was a lot of work to be done on the farm, and there was no room for anybody who wasn't willing to do their part.
Well, dairy farming in its own right is a very busy occupation because it's nearly 12 months of the year between milking cows calving down, then, dealing with all the young calves, weaning them off their mums, getting them onto grass, selling them on, I suppose, if you don't need them in the longer term. It's a busy occupation. And then, of course, there's all the grass management that's involved, like between silage and hay and spreading slurry in the springtime of the year and throughout the summer months to keep the grass growth moving along. So it's a very busy occupation, never mind having all those additional animals like pigs and sheep involved also. So you must have been a very busy person in the summer months during summer holidays. So
yes, I a lot of our summers were spent saving hay, drawing bales, which doesn't sound very exciting, but some of our land was, as we'll call it, off-site. Yeah. So the whole excitement was getting up on the top of the load of bales of hay, coming along the road and, ducking under the trees, and a lot of stuff that, you wouldn't see now, but it cultivated a sense of adventure, I think.
True.
In us, particularly in me. And, I loved the risks and, the kind of the element of not danger, but, pushing the boundaries as such. So, yeah, that was...
I remember the same thing myself as a young teenager many years ago on my uncle's farm. So, so I understand what you're saying there. It's a great joy at the time, but you grow out of it eventually, I suppose. And farming has become much more oriented towards safe rules of working or safe ways of working, because there's so much danger in modern farmyards, particularly with slurry pits and, modern sheds. You don't know what's lurking around the corner. You have to have eyes in the back of your head nearly. So it's quite a dangerous occupation if you don't know what you're doing, I suppose. Yeah. And were your parents, were they keen for you and your siblings to go to university? Was that your own choice to make a better life for yourself?
They were, particularly my mother. And my mother passed away in January. And only after that, we found out that she was the first girl in the school she went to attend UCD. Okay. So back in the 50s in rural Ireland, that was a massive achievement. Yeah. So she always instilled a strong, and she used to say to us, I don't mind what you do once you're educated. That was her philosophy. So we bought into that, and I would have been a very determined schoolgoer, particularly in my secondary school years. And I loved learning. I loved finding out things, information. I just loved having information. So it was always on my radar to keep learning, and it's still on my radar. I'm in the middle of another course now. It sort of never stops.
And would you try to, in terms of your own children, you have a child doing Leaving Cert, another person doing Junior Cert, would you try to instill the same drive in terms of education into your own children that your parents, in particular your mom, put into you?
I think I'm more, I probably have, with the type of work I do, I allow them to develop themselves and to work out for themselves where they fit, what they, what their strengths are. And even though I have 4 children, they are 4 completely different people. They have very different interests. They're very different motivations. So I do, by the nature of the work I do, I sort of try to help them to tap into their own potential and work out for themselves. And like I say on my website, to take the pen. Even my daughter now doing her junior cert, she'd say, I don't feel like studying. And my reply is, well, you know best. You know what you want. It's not for me to decide for you. You need to take ownership. And then half an hour later, you'll see her scurrying up to her room to study, but
very good.
I don't want them studying because it's my idea, unless they own it. It's not going to work in the long term.
Yeah, because I think what happens too often in Ireland is that parents are standing over their children's shoulders for junior cert and leaving cert. They get into university, then the kids taste freedom nearly for the first time in their lives, and they're more interested in going to the pub and going to the parties, the disco, than studying when they get to university, and then they fail because that stewardship is no longer there. They have their own freedom, I suppose, for the first time in their lives, and they don't know how to handle freedom responsibly, I suppose you could say. They just have too much of a good time. And I think that's happens when parents just stand over their kids' shoulders and demand too much too soon from them. So I think you're going about it the right way. You're giving them the space to make their own minds up. I think that's important. Yeah.
And it's the more difficult option. It's much easier to try and micromanage.
Yeah.
But thankfully, I have a great relationship with my 18-year-old son, and he'll tell me. Sometimes he even says to me, "Why aren't you pushing me more?" And my answer is, "You're pushing yourself, in my opinion, hard enough as it is. I just want you to be the best you can be for yourself." And the other part is in what he wants to do when he's finished. He would tell me that there's a lot of parental pressure on kids now to live out dreams that their parents may not have lived out. But again, back to the nature of the work that I do, what we resist persists. And I've tried to help him to work out what it is he likes, what he sees as his strengths, what he sees as his long-term vision or goal, and to take it step by step. That it's not a sprint. Life isn't a sprint. It's a marathon, and around every corner is a new challenge, is a new opportunity, and there will always be opportunities. So the more we broaden our view and pause and look at the big picture, it helps us to see those opportunities. So I guess what I'd like to instill in my children is to sort of see the bigger picture, think broadly, and embrace challenges, embrace opportunities, and see them as a learning, a growing and a developing exercise rather than a challenge.
Great answer, which brings me to my next question. Explain for the audience, why is it important to match your career with your core values?
Okay, so this is a big one for me. When we know our core values are our internal instructions, when we live a life aligned to our core values, aligned to who we are, who we really are, and who we want to be in the world, life flows. When we move out of our own lane and start living somebody else's values, start saying yes to things that give us that sense of discomfort, we feel resistance. And with that resistance brings stress. And very often in my coaching sessions, particularly career coaching, session 2 maybe is the values. And I get the light bulb moments, the aha, right, now I know why I need to get out of this particular role, or now I know why I need to leave this organization. Because if an organization's values don't fit with an individual values, you have continual stress, you have continual resistance, and that doesn't go away, because ultimately your core values determine who you really are. And when it comes to values, very often they're handed down the generations. So in my coaching sessions, I really, really encourage clients to stay in their own lane. Dig deep and ask yourself, are these my values, or are they the values I think my parents would like for me, or that society would like for me? And that's a big revelation. So when we're really, really sure of our core values, it makes it much easier to even search for a new career, a new role, by looking up organizations, reading mission statements. And what happens then is things start to resonate. Yes, I can connect with that. So when we can connect with an organization's sense of purpose, it helps our sense of purpose, and it motivates us and excites us. And that's what drives our passion. But when we're resisting that all the time, that's when we feel turmoil and we start waking up at night. So I would really encourage anybody who's looking for a job for the first time, who wants to move organizations, who's feeling resistance in their workplace, to dig deep and work on what exactly are my core values. And even in the workplace, a lot of conflict is around a clash of values. It's not really that he or she isn't a nice person and we don't get on. Fundamentally, our values clash, and that causes resistance. So when we can stand back and recognize that, not only does it help us in the workplace, it helps us to get along with people in all walks of life. So it's really, really useful exercise, and one, no matter what type of coaching clients come to me for, I will always work on core values with them.
And that's a great answer, and it's something I've thought about a lot over the years myself. And I do agree with you that your core values have to be aligned with the work that you do. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. And when I look back at my own life, when I was in school, what was called career counselling then was pretty nigh non-existent. And people went out into the workplace and they might have had a well-developed IQ, but their EQ was lacking, or they were lacking in, I suppose you could say, being streetwise. And one of the things I've learned over the years is when a person attends a job interview, not alone are you there to put yourself forward as being the best possible candidate for the job, it's also an opportunity for you to assess the interviewer, particularly if they're going to be your direct report at work. And if their values are not in line with yours, that's not the right job for you. You have to look elsewhere. So don't always say yes to every job offer that comes your way, particularly if you have nagging doubts in your own mind about the employer, the company's mission statement, or anything else about the company. If you've got a nagging doubt in your mind, it's probably better to say no to the job offer than to say yes, because you only end up hurting yourself in the medium to longer term, but taking on a job that's not for you. That's what I've learned in life. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Tell the audience how you coped with the transition from working in the health sector to self-employment.
As I said earlier, John, I loved my work in the health sector. I loved the camaraderie and the sense of teamwork, and it was a highly stressful, high octane, fast-paced environment. Very often we were squeezed for staff. We worked round the clock. But there was always somebody there, somebody to talk to, somebody to share challenges with, and somebody to have a cup of tea with, and, you know, talk out what was going on in any aspect of your life. And I think the biggest shock for me when I moved to Dublin, initially when I was working in the home, was this sense of isolation. I didn't have that anymore. And so when the accessing disability services, the traffic, all of those sort of relatively minor stresses started to build up, I suppose I kept them all inside, and they bubbled up and bubbled up. And then I went into coaching, and I learned strategies to help myself. And initially, it wasn't my end vision that I would have a thriving coaching practice. Nothing could have been further from the truth. I thought, this looks good. This sounds exciting. I want to explore it. And then I set up my own business. But in the HSE, something, you know, the light bulb went out and you call the electrician. There was always somebody to do all the extra tasks. You know, the computer broke down, you phoned IT. There were days when we maybe might have hoped for snow so that the buses couldn't all come up from Kerry because we were so overwhelmed with numbers. So the reverse of all of that was happening when I set up my own business. I suddenly realized that I had to market the business. I had to do my own accounts, answer my own phone, send out my own emails, answer my own emails, you know, and a huge amount of the work was not actually coaching, it was managing a business. And in the early days, that was quite easy because, you know, I didn't have the numbers. I could manage all of that. But as I got busier, it became very challenging. And somebody had told me, I guess, how much marketing, how much of the putting yourself out there, how much organization was involved in running a business. Maybe I would have run a mile from it. And a lot of solopreneurs, I think if you ask them what they saw as their biggest challenge, it is that whole multitasking and changing hats. And it can be at times isolating. Now I've joined a number of network groups over the years and coaching groups, and that has greatly helped. But that camaraderie, I work a lot from home. Again, that sense of camaraderie that I would have had in the hospital environment, and even on the project work, you know, there was always a team. So, and knowing what I know through my neuroscience, the brain is wired for connections. We're wired to belong, to connect. That releases oxytocin, which is one of our feel-good bonding neurochemicals. So that is a much bigger challenge as a solopreneur and, you know, managing my own business. But I have over the years come up with strategies, you know, to help with all of that. And as I say, I'm pretty well connected in network groups and in my own local community that, you know, that helps that sense of isolation, or I'm on my own, or I've got all these tasks. And I can reach out to different people, you know, in the groups now. Do you know somebody who would help me with that? Or have you any experience of X, Y, or Z? And I have overcome a lot of those challenges, but the biggest challenge would have been that whole sense of, right, I'm on my own now.
Of course, and you found yourself probably very isolated during the COVID pandemic period when there was extensive lockdowns and you couldn't get out of the house to meet anybody. And I think one of the other issues, and I had this discussion recently with another guest speaker on the GYFT show, is that people think that when they get their business card, they get their brand design, they get their website, that they've created their brand And that's just the beginning of the exercise. You have to do videos, you have to do blogs, because you have to introduce yourself to your target audience and make people feel that you're on a journey that they need to go on themselves. And that then gives them the inclination to contact you, to inquire about your services, to become a prospect, and then you turn them into a client eventually. So as you rightly say there, there's a lot of work for any solopreneur to do themselves. And I think the endeavor can be quite a lot bigger than people think initially. And there's a lot more work has to go into developing that brand than people think initially. Looking back at your extensive career as a radiographer and clinical lead specialist in that area, what would be your proudest project to have been involved with?
In my career as a radiographer, I think actually setting up and running the symptomatic breast imaging unit, because it was in the South Infirmary Hospital, and
very good.
It was a big undertaking to move it to Cork University Hospital, and it was nominated then as you might remember, the Department of Health introduced Centres of Excellence, and Cork University Hospital was proposed as the new Centre of Excellence for breast imaging. So for me, I had no experience because we didn't have it in the hospital, but I was always up for a challenge. And so it involved a lot of traveling around to Dublin hospitals in the UK, looking at the best equipment and designing down to the last detail of a comfortable waiting room. And the thing with symptomatic versus screening, when people come to a symptomatic clinic, they have symptoms or they have a strong family history. So they have a reason to believe that they're in a high risk category. So it's a very different experience to going to a screening service.
Yes.
So understanding patients' needs and all of that, and being having the foresight to work out how they might be feeling when they come in, what the best environment for them is, and drawing on all my prior experience in working with patients, building relationships with patients, that all helped. But I do still remember, and it was in a porta cabin, the very first breast imaging unit we had. Since then, it's moved into the main hospital, and it's 10 times the size. But that little porta cabin, the first day we opened it, the first two patients, I still remember them. I think it was a really great moment, and one that I am very proud of.
Well done to you, because it's a very sensitive subject matter. And I think that if you have patients who are turning up who've got a family history of breast cancer, or they believe they're showing symptoms themselves, they're going to be very nervous on the day. You have to relax that person and, get their imaging done. And then you're relying on getting the results as soon as possible from the consultant. And perhaps things aren't quite as bad as they may think they are, hopefully, for the patient's own sake. It's quite a traumatic and I suppose emotional experience for a lot of patients coming in for that breast imaging service. Question for you here: does gratitude really make people feel happy?
This was one I toyed with, John, and a number of years ago, I came across an article written by a monk out in Kenya, and he talked about the power of gratitude, and they had nothing. And in his everyday life, he still found something to be grateful for. And reading it, it really resonated with me, and I thought, I'm going to give this a go. And at the time, I had a lot of stressors in my life. It was in the beginning of my coaching training. So I still had all that turmoil going on post moving house for the 6th time in a number of years. And I felt a lot of stress and resistance in my life. And I decided to stick to it, to introduce a gratitude practice. And in that, I chose the morning. You can do it any time of the day, but I wanted to use it as part of my setting myself up for a successful day. So coming up with 3 things that you're grateful for. And sometimes we think there's nothing that we could possibly be grateful for if things are going really badly, but there's always something. And what it does is it flexes those muscles. It fires up new neural pathways in the brain to start focusing on the things in life that are going well. And over time, it was quite interesting. I didn't have to remind myself to do it anymore. It had become my new habit. And absolutely, I woke up in the morning focusing on what was working well and what was good in my life. And it just flicks the switch from starting your day in a sort of a downbeat negative way to starting in a more upbeat, positive manner.
Very good.
And also what it does is in times of challenge, when you have it wired into your brain so much to use that gratitude, you switch from, okay, this is a challenge. What can I be grateful for in this? And an interesting example was when we were in lockdown, and I had been practicing gratitude for a number of years at this stage. And we had gone into lockdown in the March, and the summer things started to, come back a little. Then the kids all went back to school in September. And if you remember, at Christmas, the numbers really rose again. And we found out 3 or 4 days before, probably 2 days before the kids were going back to school, that they weren't actually going back to school. And with 4 kids in the house, that was quite, going to be a challenge, the whole homeschooling again. And I remember the first morning, the Monday, they were supposed to be gone back to school. And I woke up and my brain defaulted to, I'm really grateful for the fact that I don't have to get up, scurry downstairs and make 4 lunches now. And I actually started laughing because I thought, this is amazing. This should be a really challenging downbeat day, but because I can sort of naturally come up with that and laugh at it, right, in all of this, I have managed without trying very hard to come up with the one positive in the whole thing. And so that set me up kind of on the right path, in the right frame of mind for the lockdown that followed. So yes, ultimately, if I am to answer honestly, does gratitude make you happier? Yes, it allows you to focus on the things in your life that bring you joy. And stress, happiness, all of these things, a lot of the time are a perception. So it's how we perceive ourselves. And the more we flex those muscles and fire up those new neural pathways to start recognizing the things that bring us joy in our lives and acknowledging them, it does make us happier. And it allows those happy neurochemicals to flow.
Great answer. And I do keep a gratitude journal myself. I've been keeping a journal for the past 1.5 years, maybe nearly just short of 2 years. And I found it's been of great benefit to me that every day I write down what I'm grateful for that day. And you focus on small successes every day, and they build up to a significant amount of success over time. Explain for the audience why we should not let fear of judgment silence us.
Okay. As humans, we are wired for survival. The subconscious brain wants to kick in and keep us safe. So anything that's going to threaten that will trigger a stress reaction. It will trigger the fight or flight reaction. So we're also wired for connection. We want to be liked. We want to belong. And one of the biggest fears or threats to that is judgment. So that fear of judgment can be overwhelming.
Very good.
What will they all think? If they see me do this, what will they say? And that fear of judgment stops a huge amount of people in their tracks doing what they really want to do. But ultimately, most people are so consumed by themselves and their own fears that those people that we all fear will judge us, most of them are cheerleading us. They want us to be a success. And the very minority who may be there to knock us, it says very little about us. Somebody who's out to knock you, it says a lot more about that person than it does about you. So maybe in your overcoming your fear, you've triggered something that they may be carrying. So maybe ultimately you're doing them a favor. So fulfillment for any of us is, I guess, a goal. We all want to feel fulfilled. But if every time we feel that fear of judgment in pushing ourselves or stretching outside our comfort zone, we stop and we don't set and achieve goals for ourselves, fulfillment gets further and further away. So that's ultimately what I mean by don't allow fear of judgment to stop you.
I know what you're saying there. When I started my own career coaching and professional speaking business, I used to get really uptight about recording videos, and I felt if the video wasn't perfect, it couldn't be published. But it's actually a good thing to show some vulnerability to people and to show that you are human, and people respect you more for that. And I've learned from that experience that, some small some small imperfections are good in a video because it shows your human side, and people recognize that in you and they connect with you on an emotional level. Then if you appear too perfect, people will say there's something missing here and they won't contact you.
Absolutely. And people connect with imperfection.
Yeah, correct.
And ultimately, perfection is very subjective. So what I see as perfection may not necessarily be what you see as perfection. And I spent hours and hours and hours and hours trying to perfect something, and I'm not achieving anything because I'm not putting anything out there. That doesn't serve anybody. And ultimately, my audience coming to me, as you say, need to see the vulnerability. They need to see that I'm not a robot, that I am human. I do have faults, and I'm happy to show them.
Yeah, true.
Because I'm helping everybody else on a journey, and every journey will have challenges, and we learn from our mistakes. And in coaching, we don't talk about failure. It's an awesome fail because it's all about what have I learned from that. And in demonstrating to others that we learn from our failures, it's giving them permission to take a chance.
True.
To try, because we learn from our experiences. We can read all the books in the world, but until we start the doing, we don't really learn.
True. And there's a great saying out there, knowing does not precede doing. And the more you do something, the more you learn. But you have to take that first step in the first instance to make a start, and you can develop from there. If you don't do that, you remain frozen in your comfort zone, and that's the worst possible state to be in. Tell the audience why task switching is a huge drain on our mental energy and leads to reduced productivity.
Okay. So we all like to call ourselves multitaskers, or a lot of us do anyway. But neuroscience shows us that the brain cannot actually multitask. what it's doing is task switching. So it's switching from one task to the next. So if you take, for example, I've got a task to do, I've got to get this document out, but I've got my phone beside me. Now there's a text message that needs to be answered. Oh, there's an email over here. So I'm switching task. I'm still focused on my document, but now I've got to answer this message. I've got to access a number of things to give the correct message. So I'm task switching a couple of more times. Each time I'm draining the brain of mental energy. And our always on culture, we've been energy sapping in that task switching, managing distractions, answering emails, doing all of that.
Very
and
good.
Ultimately, it's draining all of our energy. And Harvard Business Review have done a number of studies on this. And the research is showing now, there's one particular study where they've put a number of executives into a room, taken away all distractions, put them on one task. So no multitasking, no task switching, put on one task. And the average amount of time it took to complete that task was 1/3 of the amount of time it would take if they were task switching or managing, multitasking.
Indeed.
So it massively negatively impacts on productivity. And we all talk about how busy our lives are and, how little time we have in the day. But if we can better manage our distractions, and it's a huge challenge, it is a work in progress for myself, just to stop that task switching, prioritize, right, what do I need to get done today? And as well, John, what it does is if we have 1 or 2 quick tasks first thing in the morning, stay on task, complete it, it releases dopamine in the system, which motivates us and gives us momentum to keep going and keep achieving. So it's a natural way to get dopamine into the system in a useful manner, and it will help us to increase our productivity over the course of the day. But of course, the natural default is, again, that fear of judgment. He or she didn't answer my email, didn't answer my text message. I've got all this stuff building up. I need to keep an eye on everything. But what we're actually doing is depleting our mental energy well in the process and reducing our productivity. And eventually we get exhausted.
On a positive note, what does success mean for you in your coaching and neuroscience business?
What does success mean to me? This is one that I think has changed over the years. Success for me means that my life is in flow, that I don't feel resistance, that my coaching business, every day I'm living a life aligned with my core values, aligned with who I want to be in the world, to what my purpose and passion is, which is helping people to tap into all that hidden potential and live their best lives. So, but along with all of that, in my early days, I learned what life priorities were. So I have a list of life priorities. I have my core values. And as long as I am living and working aligned to both, and that I'm not being overwhelmed, I have a good balance. I'm not overwhelmed in my coaching business, nor am I overwhelmed in my life outside coaching, but I have a nice balance. And I continually am growing and developing myself. I'm learning from my clients, and I'm tweaking each program to be better than the program that has gone before. And I think I strive, success for me is getting better every week, every month, and continuing to learn. I think I said that at the beginning. I'm an eternal student. I'm always reading or learning, or because I think there's always something new. And I love to sort of get on top of new learnings, new teachings, new ways of doing things, new ways of thinking.
And a final question for you, Catriona. You're an accredited All-Ireland Business All-Star. How did you feel when you were told you got that award?
I have to say, John, there was a little bit of imposter syndrome, really me. And then when they went through it and I sort of really acknowledged that this was me and I was being awarded this, I felt a huge sense of gratitude.
Very good.
I was really grateful for the opportunity that the challenge in the move to Dublin had given me. And initially, and that's what I mean about seeing opportunities and challenges, very often we can get stuck in a story. And that's something I talk a lot about in coaching, is getting stuck in a story. Oh, you know, I have to move to Dublin. This is going to be really challenging. I won't be able to do anything else. And when we continually challenge the story and start to see opportunities in it and go with those opportunities, and I think I felt validated.
Very good.
Yeah. And that validation and gratitude were the two biggest emotions, I guess.
Well done. And fair play to you. You had the initiative in the first place to apply for the award. And then when you got the award, it was a validation and you felt a sense of gratitude for all the effort you had put in over the previous number of years in building and developing your coaching business. Three remarkable things I can take away from today's interview. Firstly are gratitude. It's highly important to keep a gratitude journal and to record 2 or 3 or 4 reasons why you feel grateful for the day's efforts you've put in. Secondly, don't let your fear of judgment stop you. There's no such thing as perfection. And if you allow perfection to get in your way, you won't step out of your comfort zone and develop. So be brave. Take a step out of your comfort zone, embrace a constructive challenge, and who knows what the future will bring for you. And finally, as Catriona said earlier on, when you start a business on your own, whether it's a coaching business, consultancy business, there's a whole lot of work involved in getting that business up and running. And it's a case of having to define what the most important tasks are. Don't try to get sucked into doing too much, too soon of everything. Identify the crucial tasks, like developing your brand, getting your website developed, getting out there to networking events, getting prospects, getting clients. That's more important than keeping an accurate set of accounts initially. So define what activities are important and concentrate on those. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before I let you go?
Sorry, John, if there's something I'd like to share with the audience, as in a tip or advice or...
Yeah.
A question I start off with a lot of the time in my coaching sessions is quite simply, who would you be if you weren't afraid? What would you be doing? And ask yourself those questions and go from there. What is it that I'm really afraid of? What's holding me back? And challenge the narrative, challenge the story. Is there a story there that I'm getting stuck in? And go from there.
That's a very challenging question, and well done for asking the audience that question. And on that note, I'll bring today's show to an end. Thank you, Catriona.
Thanks very much, John, for having me.
You're very welcome.